Today, debt ceiling deadlock. President Biden and Speaker McCarthy unable to agree to any promises to limit spending, along with raising the debt ceiling. The two walking out of that meeting yesterday with no new movement on a deal. They do say, however, they will meet again this Friday.
I said I'd come back and talk. There's one thing I'm ruling out is default, and I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to pass a budget that, in fact, caused massive cuts.
In this meeting, I heard nothing new. I literally asked the president personally, do you believe there's any place in government we could find savings? I know they said things that were not true about how we would move forward.
Virginia Congressman Ben Cline joined me earlier in the program. He predicted what's next in these negotiations. Watch.
I'm talking to Democrats in the House who are pushing the administration to move. And so you're seeing behind the scenes Democrats starting to push this president, and I have a feeling he's going to be coming to the table very soon.
And that's certainly what we saw in the Senate. Joining me right now is Wisconsin Senator, member of the Senate Budget, Finance, and Homeland Security Committees, Ron Johnson. Senator, it's great to see you this morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Maria.
We spoke with Senator Mike Lee from Utah on Sunday. He told me that he's been working hard, trying to rally up support to get behind Kevin McCarthy. What's going on in the Senate in terms of the debt limit deal?
Well, obviously, I joined in signing Mike Lee's letter that said we would not vote for any clean increase in the debt ceiling. We have to attach to it fiscal controls. But, Maria, let's just talk a few numbers. I know that's almost anathema here in Washington, D.C., but prior to the pandemic, the federal government in total spent $4.4 trillion in 2019. During the pandemic, we went on a spending spree. We wasted hundreds of billions of dollars, but we were spending well north of $6 trillion every year. Last fiscal year, we spent about $6.2 trillion, and President Biden wants to spend $6.9 trillion in 2024. So we've gone from $4.4 trillion to a baseline of about $6.2, and that's quite honestly all that the House is trying to do is return to the $6.2 trillion baseline. I would argue we really ought to go back to 4.4 adjusted for inflation and population growth, but I completely support what the House is doing. I'm just pointing out how reasonable their request is, and for anybody to call what they're doing cutting government, we're not cutting it. We're just trying to reduce how much President Biden is trying to dramatically increase spending.
I mean, this is so dangerous to be playing footsies with the potential of default. I mean, I don't understand why the president thinks that he has this ridiculous line in the sand, as James Freeman writes in the Journal this week, and he can just play politics with this. It's all about who wins. He wants to beat the Republicans.
Well, he's confident that the compliant and corrupt media will back him up and support his position, as opposed to what they should be talking about is the only plan right now to avert default. And by the way, we would never default. We've got more than enough revenue to service our debt. But the only plan is the one that the House has passed now. Right. And it increased the debt ceiling, and it's an incredibly reasonable package. You know, I was working with Mike Lee and House conservatives as we just started those discussions about what they would accept, what they would vote for, what we would vote for as, you know, an increased debt ceiling. We were talking about going back to that 2019 baseline. That they conceded a 2022 baseline of $6.2 trillion. That's how far we've moved in terms of being reasonable in conceding. But that's only a start. I mean, we're $32 trillion in debt on a path to 50. It's unsustainable. It's the reason we have this persistent inflation now. It wasn't transitory. People have to actually look at the reality situation, but the media will never report on the reality situation, and they will never put the blame where the blame lies, and that's an irresponsible president, irresponsible Treasury Secretary, and just out of control government spending.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you raised the media, because we're talking now about some of the most serious allegations leveled at a sitting president, in my view, ever. And the media will not cover it in terms of this influence peddling. The White House is now going after Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer this morning ahead of his press conference. He's got a press conference that's happening at 9 a.m. on the Biden family influence peddling. It's happening in about an hour. And before that, a spokesperson says Comer is leading a, quote, evidence-free, politically motivated investigation. The White House also says Republicans have been weak on China, not President Biden, writing it's a, quote, ironic reality. accountability. Senator, I don't know how they get away with this. We know that the first thing that the president did when he walked into the Oval Office, one of the first decisions he made was to cancel the China initiative. And I'm wondering if that's one of the decisions that James Comer is investigating in terms of one of the decisions that he got paid for. He says, the White House says that this is evidence-free. You and Chuck Grassley were the first senators to really get into the Hunter Biden situation and investigate. Is it evidence-free?
No, there's all kinds of evidence. And Maria, you saw what happened to us in 2022. We were falsely accused of soliciting and disseminating Russian disinformation. Sound familiar? That's how the media basically dismissed our report in September of 2020 that completely laid out the vast web of foreign financial entanglements. Now, Chairman Comer has added to that evidence. Understand, these investigations are not easy. People that commit criminal acts try not to leave a paper trail. So it's very difficult to piece this all together, particularly when you have the leftists, the progressives in the mainstream media doing everything they can to undermine your investigation and falsely accuse you of disseminating Russian disinformation, as they falsely accuse the laptop of being Russian disinformation as well.
Yeah, so James Comer walked us through this web of LLCs that the Biden family created. And money came from China and other adversarial countries, by the way, not just China. Yeah. But going into these LLCs, and then from there, the money went from the LLCs to various Biden family members. What can you tell us about that? What were they getting paid for?
Well, again, on the bank records, you're not going to see bribe to change this policy. You have to infer what's happening here. You have to take a look at the bulk of the evidence. You have to follow the money and realize, well, so what did this Biden family member do to earn that amount of money? I mean, that's what we did with Hunter Biden in Ukraine. I mean, what did he know about oil and gas to be on the board of Burisma and knock down about $4 million over the course of a number of years when his father was the point person in Ukraine? That corrupt system. So again, you have to infer these things. You're not going to get necessarily hard proof, but there's such a huge body of evidence. We had it in September 2020. It was all ignored. It was all denigrated. It was all called Russian disinformation. It's the same playbook of the Democrats, the same playbook of the media that wants to prop up and cover up for the Bidens. So
what happens then? What happens if James Comer has the evidence to prove today that Joe Biden and his family members accepted money from foreign countries and he made decisions based on policy? What happens to Joe Biden then?
Well, my guess is the media will do the exact same thing they did to Chuck Grassley and I when we showed overwhelming evidence of the vast financial entanglements of the Bidens that would compromise the president. They'll just say, oh, there's no proof of a crime here.
Yeah.
Comer's not indicting anybody. Well, we obviously don't have the ability to indict people. We really can't charge a crime.
Yeah.
We don't even have the full investigatory power as, for example, the FBI. But what we're doing is we're piecing together all this information, the corrupt investigation by the FBI, the corruption within the DOJ, the corruption within our intelligence agencies. Now, the House Weaponization Committee has released their report showing that people inside the CIA were actually soliciting signatures from active CIA employees for that fraudulent letter that impacted our 2020 election. So, again, we're piecing it all together. You can say it's circumstantial. You don't have, like you say, you don't have these people writing on a piece of paper 10% to Vice President Biden. Yeah. They do it cryptically, 10% to the big guy. That's how criminals operate. They do it cryptically.
Well, you told me on Sunday Morning Futures a couple of weeks ago that Anthony Blinken lied to you under oath. Mm-hmm. That's a felony when he said he was not in touch with Hunter Biden. The House Judiciary Committee, as you just mentioned, releasing that report, testimony claiming an active CIA official helped the campaign, the Biden campaign, gain the signatures for the infamous letter, discrediting the Biden laptop as Russian disinformation. Senator, are you going to have Anthony Blinken back to talk about his entanglements with Hunter Biden?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the subpoena power. I'm assuming the House will. We've invited him back. We've asked him to preserve all of his records, plus his records of his wife. I mean, just think of that. I mean, he denied emailing Hunter Biden, but he did email him because we have Hunter Biden's laptop. But even worse, his wife was being the conduit. He knew he shouldn't be talking to Hunter Biden in 2015 about things like related to Ukraine, but he was still going to do it. But he had his wife contact Hunter to set up a phone call between Burisma's Democrat-led lobbying firm in the U.S. and then Deputy Secretary of State Anthony Blinken.
Wow.
Again, the volume of evidence is clear, but it makes clear the corruption within these agencies, but it also makes clear the corruption in the mainstream media, who will largely ignore it and minimize it.
Unbelievable. Senator, we're going to be watching. Thanks very much for being here this morning. Always good to see you, sir. Ron Johnson this morning in Washington.